So going back to school again, there was an incident where I think it was you and somebody else you were with, and were basically bullying a couple of younger boys, and they were stripped.
Yeah.
And how did that come about? Do you regret incidents like that? Did you later regret those incidents, and think that the police obviously were looking upon you badly because of what you'd done before previously?
Well, no, not really, because what they actually did is they went back and had further statements taken to actually turn that around. So instead of another person being involved, it was basically all down to me.
Oh, okay.
And that was actually part of my case on the appeal.
So they almost re-interviewed the victims of
well,
that?
Well, they did.
They did?
They did, and they retook statements, and in that way, you can't say that, like I say, they were convinced of anything. They weren't convinced of anything. They actually specifically set out to do that.
Sure.
You know, there was no convincing of it. They actually set out specific actions to carry that out, and they did.
So you believe that they had you, they knew, they had in their minds that it was you that had committed the attack.
Yeah.
And so any other evidence that they could turn around to make you look badly, they did.
Yeah. And, you know, that is how they operate. That is how they operate.
I know during your interview you weren't sort of allowed to have a solicitor present. You had your school teacher or your schoolmaster.
Yeah.
How did that affect the interview, do you think, what was your relationship with your schoolmaster? Was it a good one?
He was my jailer.
He was your jailer?
He was my jailer.
So
that's drunken one at that.
So it was a similar relationship to that of your father, really?
Yeah, very much. Very much. And I mean, I'll give you an example of it. When I was 11, I was out with some of my mates messing about on the garages, and I fell off and broke both my wrists. And I went home and went to bed and didn't tell anyone.
Because you knew you wouldn't
have
any
no one
support,
to tell.
Or there was nobody?
There was nobody to tell. Who was I going to tell?
It sounds a strange question, but how did it make you feel as a child? You just felt, I guess, just very, very lonely.
Yeah. Yeah.
You kind of looked after yourself as such, as a child?
Yeah, pretty much. I was very insulated and very isolated. Not at school. At school I was fine. I was, you know, quite easy going at school. And personally, I was very emotionally disturbed kid.
Okay, so the following description, I'm just going to read out the actual idea they had of who the attacker was that they had long curly ginger hair. They were aged 17 to 21, 5'7" to 5'10" in height, a white speckled shirt, green parka, blue jeans, Doc Martens, a deep Manchester accent, and carrying a white handled pocket knife. We've talked about this briefly before, but did that match you at all? Did you
No.
kind of think, why are they?
Apart from the boots and jeans,
which I guess pretty much every teenager is wearing.
Yeah, pretty much the boots and jeans.
Did they explain to you why they were still questioning you, although you didn't seem to match the profile of the attacker at all?
No, they basically said that because of the new statements they'd had made, that it was basically the same kind of offence and obviously the same kind of person who did it.
So even though you didn't match the profile of the person at all?
Yeah.
Okay, so and also a lorry driver from the Newcastle area had actually seen the artist impression in the Manchester Evening News, and he immediately came forward with a vital lead. Do you think that the police actually missed this key information? Do you think that the suspect was out there somewhere? Does that sound like it could have been a positive lead that was missed out on in your eyes?
Yeah, it's something that's followed up, but you know, I don't think they investigated the case at all anyway. I think they do what they usually do. They fit somebody to the offence and that's that. They don't really go out and investigate it at all.
So again, am I right in saying there was never actually any forensic evidence?
Well, there was forensic evidence.
There was
forensic evidence, but they destroyed it all before my trial.
I've also heard about that. Yeah, they actually just somehow mislaid the evidence.
They claimed it was an accident,
but there was no forensic evidence that related to you.
No, there was no evidence that related to me other than the statement I signed for the police. That was the sum total of evidence.
Yeah. Now, if we move on to your time in prison, How important was it during your prison years to sort of have a sense of humour as such, or how do you find any enjoyment in that kind of environment? Did you have any good times during your years, although that might seem...
Yeah, I did actually. I mean, I met a lot of good people along the way. You know, maybe good people who've done some bad things, but you know, a lot of good people along the way, and you know, enjoyed those times with them people and them experiences. And you know, at the same time, I've actually taken positives out of it, because you know, I've lived with every nationality there is basically on this planet. You know, apart from a couple of Eskimos or something, I've pretty much lived with every nationality, and lived in a very closely confined situation where you have to get on. You know, so it doesn't matter where these people are from or what they do, you're all equal there. And you know, everybody has a story to tell, and some of the stories they have to tell were, you know, really, really interesting and educational. And you know, in a lot of ways, the other guys in the jail were my education. So I didn't get any from anybody else. You know, the system didn't look after me. The system just abused me from the very first second I got in prison. The first thing they did was beat me up.
Really?
That was the first thing they did when I got into prison.
Tell us about that. So when you actually arrived in prison?
Well, basically, because this offence had happened over a month or so ago, they were, you know, I guess they were actually waiting for me to turn up. They were waiting for me to turn up, and when I did, they laid into me.
So did they believe that you were also, that the child had been abused as well? Were you tarred with a sort of paedophile type label as well? But
then again, I mean, the vast majority of them then were ex-military, and it was quite a backward and in many ways sadistic prison system still in them days in 1978. And you know, brutality was pretty much a way of life. And you know, that's how it was. You know, they didn't give a fuck about me. Why? You know, I was a scumbag, and they were going to treat me as such because they could, and they could get away with it.
And as time went on, did you learn to defend yourself? Did you find you were becoming more like them as a way of surviving in there?
Yeah, in lots of ways. But it's not only them; it's, you know, the people you're living with as well. You know, let's face it, the vast majority of criminals are in prison because they prey on other people. That's what they do. Whatever the crime may be, they're actually preying on somebody else in some way, shape or form. Not everybody, you know, I'm not tarring everyone with the same brush, but a large majority. And, you know, I was 15 years old in prison, and I was a sex offender and a scumbag and an animal and, you know, the scum of the earth, and everybody thought they could do anything they wanted to me. And you had to learn to fight and fight back, and you know, it wasn't about going into a fight and, you know, all of a sudden acting like Bruce Lee, because that don't really happen. It's, you know, just stand your ground, don't back down to anyone. Never back down to anyone.